Hello, welcome back to Slaying the Craft, the show where we go inside the mind of thriller writers. I am your host, Sabrina Thatcher. I am an author, book coach, and podcaster, but most importantly, a huge fanatic of the genre. Today, I'm really excited to introduce to you that my first time having two guests on the show. It's very exciting. A writing duo. This is JJ Viertel. Did I say it right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Viertel.
Well done.
It's a pseudonym used by father-son writing team of Jack and Josh Viertel, who live in Maine and in New York. Wow. JJ Viertel is the pseudonym used by the father-son writing team of Jack and Josh Viertel, who live in Maine and New York. With Josh Viertel's background in environmental activism and organic farming, and Jack's deep roots in storytelling and theater, the duo offers a novel that's grounded in real-life experience as it is in gripping plot. But they mostly write in Szechuan restaurants and occasionally retreat to a shared Google Doc or a sofa overlooking the, nope. Tell me how to say
Eggemoggin.
The
it. Eggemoggin Reach on the coast of Maine. The Glass Eel is their debut thriller. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Glad
Thanks
to be
for having us.
Awesome. Okay, well, The Glass Eel right here, published by Mysterious Press earlier this year, I believe, published September 9th in 2025. Tell me about the book.
Well, it's a thriller about the coast of Maine, which you just said. It was inspired by an idea that Josh had. Both of us are thriller, huge fans of thrillers and mysteries, but mainly reading them, not creating them. We've never created one before. And also some great noir movies and television shows. So we're attached to the genre, I would say, as fans. And Josh had this idea, and he's going to tell you more or less what the idea was. And then he came to me and said, this would make a great Netflix series. And I said, I don't know anybody at Netflix. Let's write a book.
Yeah, so I came across, I love to fish. I grew up fishing, and I'm an obsessive fly fisherman. And I just love the coastal ecosystem in Maine. And I came across this story about the Elver Wars. So Elver is another name for glass eels. They're these baby eels, where over the course of about 2 years, the price of Elvers went up higher than the price of gold. And so there were these fights breaking out on the banks of rivers. There was illegal poaching. There were questions about indigenous fishing rights. On all of this sort of interesting crime scene emerged on the banks of these rivers just in the spring when the Elver Run was happening. And it was an environmental concern and a social concern, and also had to do with black markets and the coast of Maine, which I love. I thought this is really interesting. And the reason they're so valuable is they're shipped to, there's an explosion in the popularity of sushi. So they get exported to South Korea and China and Japan, where they're grown up in fish ponds and turned into unagi. So if you've ever had an eel and avocado anywhere, you're like connected to this incredibly weird black market story that happens on the coast of Maine. And this is really interesting. What if we created something that was like Breaking Bad, but on the coast of Maine instead of in Albuquerque, and instead of being about crystal meth, it was about baby eels. So I pitched this to my dad, and he said, "That's really weird. I like the idea.
It's a weird idea, but it's awesome.
I don't know about how you'd sell something to Netflix, but let's write a book, and then we'll sell the book." And I thought, well, that's a weird idea. Like, it's hard to write a book. It's hard to sell a book. And then to turn around and say, now we're going to sell it to Netflix is like, it seems like a heavy lift and a circuitous path. But I thought, well, what else are we doing together? Let's find a way to spend time together. So we started writing.
And
Did it work? Did
Yeah,
you guys sell this to Netflix?
we haven't sold it to Netflix. And
Okay,
it wouldn't be sold to Netflix. It would be sold if it was ever sold to a production company.
The options, yeah, and then Netflix does distribution
But what
down
did
the
we
road,
do?
yeah.
So no, we were meeting anyway once a week in a Szechuan restaurant in New York because Josh was in New York one day a week and I was still working, and my office is near Times Square, and so we would talk about anything, and then we started talking about this book and creating characters and the vague ideas of a plot surrounding the Elver Wars. And it just developed over time. And then, once a week was not enough. So we set up a weekly meeting, and then we just started writing, and I sent him a first chapter. And he said, "This looks good. Where does it go from here?" I said, "I have absolutely no idea." So then we had to really sit down and plan and plot it out. And much of the first chapter had to be jettisoned because it didn't have anything to do with where the book was going. But that's how it started.
But that's always how it starts, right?
Yeah.
So many, like, your first pages are not the ones that stick in the book.
Right. The same with opening numbers in musicals, incidentally.
Yeah.
You write an opening number for a musical, and then the last thing you do is you throw it out and write the right opening.
So, talk to me about your protagonist, Jeanette King. So, why her? Why tell her story?
Well, I started with the idea of the sort of typical protagonist in one of these stories, a kind of, you know, rough and tumble guy who's a classic hero in his 30s, square jawed, tough Mainer guy. And it felt kind of boring. And my dad said, I think this would be more interesting if it was someone else. And we started talking about my grandmother, my dad's mom, Janet, who was a fascinating character. She was an underwater photographer, and also, which was a thing people in her generation, especially women, didn't do. I still have her
Yeah.
huge metal camera casing that she put her camera in underwater. And she taught me about tide pools and ecosystems. She's a big influence on my life and certainly on my dad's. And we thought, what if we kind of based it on some aspects of Janet? So we named her Jeanette. And so that was sort of started it.
Yeah, and she was she was my mother, so I knew her all my life, obviously. And she was not wildly eccentric, but she was an opinionated and funny person. Not a typical. She never felt at home, playing cards at the country club with her contemporaries. So she just seemed like an interesting place to start. Now, not much of her is left in the book, except for her fondness for gin and tonics. But some pieces of it still remain that really are based on her. And it
Yeah.
also seemed like if it ever was going to be a media piece, that there are these wonderful, wonderful women who age out of leading roles in Hollywood and on television because Hollywood doesn't know what to do with them and television doesn't know
Hmm.
what to do with them, and so there aren't a lot of great roles for people like Jodie Foster or Kate Winslet. And so we thought, well, should that ever happen, this would be an interesting sales pitch. But
Yeah.
that's not really why we did it. We did it because we did it. We
But I
wanted to
think you're
make
hitting on something though
unusual.
that I think is interesting for writers who think about this, just kind of like going into the craft aspect of this. Um, so what we're looking future state, right? Like you're looking for more than just this story right now. You're kind of thinking broader. And I think that's really interesting, like almost like motivator for writers. If maybe they have like fan casted their books or anything like that. And how is that like is that something that you guys do when you're writing? Are you fan casting? Or is it like you're just like, okay, well, we could be looking at down the road. This would be like an important aspect for us to cover.
I don't think so. I think once we started writing, we just sort of had fun inventing the characters and the plot. And um, in some ways, we did it for ourselves, and we hoped that if we liked it, other people might like it. But
Yeah,
I don't think we were calculating in that way. Not that I
got
have
it.
any problem with people doing that, but I just don't think we were doing it.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah,
also there was an impulse to not have it be, I don't know if boring is the right word, because there's some sort of tropes that are really well done that are good, but like we made a rule for ourselves, like no drugs. I mean, there's a little sidebars about drugs in the book, but like this is not like eels are actually on the surface and underneath the true story is this is about smuggling cocaine. It's like there's
yeah,
so much about smuggling cocaine, and Jeanette is not. Um, it's not about a hot babe taking on the bad guys in a sort of like
yeah,
Charlie's Angel kind of way, and it's not a male protagonist. Like, and that kind of it just forces you to do things that are a little more real and a little more interesting and eccentric, and don't kind of fall into these typical ways of telling these stories.
yeah. No, I think that's really interesting. You also have a really big through line of the indigenous aspect of the story. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Tell me like where that came from, what you were trying to achieve, how you got to this information.
Yeah, I mean, it felt pretty quickly really important or kind of impossible to do a good job telling the story of the place of Maine. For us, Maine became kind of the lead character in the book underneath the protagonist, Jeanette. And you can't tell the story of any place in this country without acknowledging that on some level if you're really trying to tell it. And it's particularly true of Maine, and it's really true of the Elver fishery as well, because I mean, here's these tribes are being told what they can and cannot do, and they're going, "Hey, but before you guys got here, we were managing this fishery sustainably, like since before Moses parted the Red Sea. So why are you telling me what we can and can't do?" And incidentally, we are often like very low income and don't access the same resources that those folks do because of structural reasons and historical reasons. And so it felt like you really couldn't tell the story of Maine without it. And you certainly couldn't tell the story of the glass eel fishery without touching on it. And it was a real part of the Elver Wars as well. Right now, the tribes get 40% of the quotas, as they should, and they administer how those are distributed themselves, which is distinct from how the state does it, which is via a lottery. So it felt like a really important story. It was also just really interesting, and I think important for folks not to forget. The other aspect is Maine is very focused culturally on like who's really from here and who's not. And so there are generations of Mainers who talk about who's from away, the weekenders, people coming up from Massachusetts, all that kind of stuff. And from away is a big concept. And as we were trying to tackle that idea, one day, Dad said to me, the truth is, if you're not Wabanaki, you're from away. And we thought, oh, that's a really important notion. Let's dig into that a little bit.
Yeah. And I think we also wanted to spread a fairly wide net, pardon the sort of pun, over the population, because Maine is full of fascinating characters and people. And so, there was no chance that we were going to leave out indigenous people. It was just a question of how we would integrate them, given that we're not indigenous people ourselves. Luckily, our editor at Mysterious is.
That was my question. Was like, okay, well then, where did you get the information? How do you know? Like, you're writing outside your own experience, that kind of thing.
He was the quote unquote sensitivity reader.
Yeah.
Want to be called that, but she did call us out on a couple of phrases and things where she said, I don't think that's such a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this question of writing from a perspective that isn't your own is really important. If authors only wrote from perspectives that were their own, it would be very boring. I think
so boring.
My dad and I aren't that interesting. I mean, like we couldn't be all the characters in the story. But it's really important to approach that with humility. Ask people who do have those experiences to read the book and give their opinion, and then really listen also with humility to what they say and make changes based on it. And then to really try to put yourself in other folks' shoes, which is tricky because you don't want to do it in a way where you're claiming to know what it is to be in their shoes. It's sort of an active empathy exercise that you really try as best you can to engage in. And no, you can't get 100%. The intention's there, and then also just try to get feedback and understand it as best you can. And in the end, we felt like it was more important to include perspectives that weren't our own, both for the sake of the book and kind of ethically, than it is to say, oh, well, that's a minefield, let's just not do it, which I think is a disservice to the world when people do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, minefields are a good part of thrillers.
Yeah.
They are.
The unexpected happens, and it happens for cultural reasons as well as plot reasons, and then suddenly you're in a stew of a totally different kind.
Yeah.
We love that.
Yeah. So you have chapters in the book as well from the point of view of various unique characters: a crab, an eel, a squirrel and tree, a lobster. Tell me about writing these chapters, how that worked, and why you chose to add these point of views to your narrative.
Well, this was actually Josh's idea initially to write one,
Yeah.
and he can tell you about how that happened. And then it turned out that there were others that would be used. Having written one, it would be interesting to spread them throughout. And the earliest decision we made was that we did not want to be anthropomorphic in any way. We didn't want to go into the brain of an animal. We don't understand the brain of an animal. We were just going to look at the behavior of an animal.
Right.
And because that's all we can know. But Josh, you can talk about the first one that we did, or that you did.
Yeah. So I was trying to. There's a particular place on Eggemogan Reach on the coast that I really love, and I thought this is such an emblematic place, and I want to convey what it feels like to be there. And I was thinking about how to do that, and I remembered this passage from Grapes of Wrath where Steinbeck's trying to convey the feeling of being in the Dust Bowl, passing through, I believe it's Oklahoma, and he describes a land turtle, a tortoise, crossing a road very slowly. And in that description, he captures the dust, the way the plants are, the way the air feels, people moving by, and also sets up sort of a metaphor for people on a slow journey who don't have power but are trying to get someplace, and the forces that exert themselves on them. And I just love that passage. So I took it and I cut and pasted it, and I replaced everywhere where it said turtle with crab. And then I changed all the adjectives. And this is pretty good. And I just kept on hammering away at it. And at first it was just a description and it didn't relate to the plot. And then we found ways to have it relate back to the plot. And we thought, oh, the people in nature are always interacting in the actual world, in Maine especially. And it would be interesting thing to kind of leverage the plot forward using these passages that are more observation of nature. So it's not just, oh, now we're going to write about nature. It's nature, and then there's something happens in there that weaves into how humans behave and interact with each other, so it drives the plot.
Yeah, no, I love that. The crab chapter is the one that I have read so far, and I was like, I love the idea because it's third person, like omniscient, really, because they're just narrating this what the crab is doing, etc. And then we get into the interaction with the human, which obviously that's like it's a mysterious person, but that's an important person that's going to be in the story. So I thought from a narrative perspective, that was really clever way to be able to give more information, more education, and draw the reader in, but then also propel the plot forward. And it's unique because we don't really see a lot of points of view from inanimate objects or non-human characters unless it's like a ghost. So that's really an interesting way to do that. What was the most fun part of the story for you to write?
A good question. I think there are adventures that people go on little by little. The Jeanette King, the protagonist, collects a couple of people around her. We between ourselves we referred to them as the Three Musketeers, and they find themselves forced to go to places that they don't understand, to have to encounter things that they don't know how they're going to come out. And that was always fascinating to do and fun to do because we ourselves didn't always know how they were going to come out. It was just like this: if these people have to go here and meet this person, what's going to happen next?
Yeah.
This person isn't who they say they are, and that's all we knew. And then we would just take it from there and go and bat it back and forth, either in person or on Google Meet or somewhere or in a Szechuan restaurant. And it was just great fun to invent. For all of the talk that we do and have done about nature and how the environment works thematically in the book, a lot of the fun was the adventurous part of it, was the thriller part of it, which was largely imagined.
Yeah.
Not based on that. It was based on the original idea that there were Elver Wars, but we didn't take anything from that documentarily. We just ran off from there and invented, and that was fun.
I bet.
That's
like
your imagination.
That's where you get to play like all the crimes happen and all of the you get to be the bad guy and you get to be the good guy and the hero. Right. Like that's what's fun about writing a thriller. For you, Josh, what was like the most fun part?
I loved finding the ways in for the absolutely insane things that we've heard people say or do in the actual world, because the actual world, things happen in the actual world that are funnier, stranger, more violent, more weird than in the fictitious world we could create. And so as a writer, you're always sort of cataloging like, oh, that's really good. I got to find a place for that. And finding ways to have that become a part of the plot and slip them in. Mainers especially have the most wonderful ways of saying things, and figuring out how to slip in some of those sayings, some of those interactions was really, really fun.
That's fun. So tell me about how you drew upon your various expertise to create this story. Josh, you are the president of Slow Food USA, a global network and nonprofit. Can you talk about your experience as a leader within the food advocacy movement and how that related to what you were doing here with the eels?
Yeah, well, when I ran Slow Food, and before that, as building a farm at Yale University for their educational programming, and then after that, doing other stuff. I've been exposed to so many examples of how where we hurt the environment, we hurt people, and where we hurt people, we're often hurting the environment. And the Elver story, the story of Glass Eels, the actual story, putting aside the crime thriller, is just completely textbook about that, and also touches on all these other interesting questions, like we were talking about indigenous rights and economic development versus environmental conservation, and so that whole world was really important to me. And the idea of fighting for something you believe in that is connected to food and the way we grow and share food or fail to share it is it's really important to me. And I think I took away a lot of that. The other thing that I think influenced it was even before Slow Food, I've just always spent time kind of roaming and rambling, following my footsteps through different agrarian scenes, and you just meet really extraordinary, wonderful people with really cool values who march to the beat of their own drummer, who are picking watermelons or growing beef cows on pasture, and you meet these characters who work really hard but have a lot of integrity and are very eccentric and are free thinkers. And I feel like those characters, different versions of those characters, kind of found their way into the book in a way that for me matters, and I think just influenced who I am also. So I think that being on farms and being on the ocean too, fishing, you just meet characters, and those, as a writer, I think that I feel most like a writer not when I'm writing, but when something interesting happens, I go, I've got to write that down, I've got to capture that because it's going to be useful later. And I think that that experience out in the world influenced things a lot for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Jack, what about you with your expertise? I mean, sure you've met probably a million interesting characters in your career.
Well, yeah,
But
but
how did like your past experiences apply to
it's
this?
a very different group of people in the theater, but they certainly can be eccentric and sometimes out of control. Um, but I think more than that, what I brought to this book was years and years of storytelling, of working on storytelling with writers, very great writers, August Wilson and Tony Kushner and David Huang and people like that, and helping to structure pieces for the theater, and also listening very carefully to how those writers created dialogue, rewrote dialogue, found voices for each character that were individual. Um, and so I brought whatever I could of that into this world. Many of the characters who grew out of Josh's experience, I sort of then polished a little bit or changed a little bit to give them their own voice so that they didn't sound like each other and
Yeah.
that kind of and inventing plots is something that everyone in the theater has to do, and also collaborating is something that everyone in the theater has to do. So collaborating with Josh, and we love each other pretty deeply, unlike some sets of collaborators I've worked with, was easy and fun because over the years I think I sort of figured out how to collaborate and not set off, fire bombs in the middle of things. And I think it made it easy. Are different characters in some ways. He and I. I'm very much an impulse buyer, and he's very much a planner. So we did get into disagreements about how much time we were spending on this or that passage, but they weren't. They were handled by two people who love each other, and it worked out fine.
Yeah. Um, so how did you guys write this? Did you like chapters back and forth? Did you plot, like do an outline, or did you pants it, kind of do both? What was the process?
It was a little bit of both. We worked almost entirely in a Google document, and what we would do, we would have a discussion, a sort of strategic planning session about who was going to do what and what needed to happen. If there were questions about the plot, we'd work through them just verbally with us, and then we would divvy it up. Say, I've got an idea for this. Let me take a crack at it. I'll write. You write that part. I'll write this part. We'd split it up. We'd write, and then the other person would go in the commenting function and suggesting function, not as an editor in the Google Doc, so that every change is tracked and every comment's visible, and suggest a bunch of changes. And sometimes that would be it's not where a comma goes, and sometimes it would be like, this dialogue is too expository. Let me rework it and cut a bunch of stuff, and then we'd flip, and the person would go through and accept every change they can, and not accept the ones that needed to be talked through, and resolve the comments as best they could. And then we would meet and talk about the areas where we were at an impasse and kind of work through it in real time. And that was the process, I think. Generally speaking, I wrote more the nature sections and parts of the dialogue that involved technical aspects about the fishery or weird sort of historical things that I had come across. And Dad, you wrote most of the remaining dialogue and a lot of the general plotting of
Yeah.
of the story, the kind of internal experiences of the characters, stuff like that.
Yeah, so I'm curious. I have kind of two follow-up questions. One, what do you want readers to walk away from this book feeling? That's the first question.
I think, first of all, I want to have them be entertained and have a good time and and want to turn the page to find out what happens next.
Yeah.
But that's sort of the that's a sort of a it's not a low bar, but it's sort of the basic uh, design
That's
of
what
what I
every
feel
writer
I'm
wants
supposed to do.
that.
Yeah. So in addition to that, I think having them feel like they've learned a lot about a place that they didn't know much about, even if they thought they knew something about it. I mean, there are lots of vacationers in Maine who could read this and think, "Wow, look at what's happening while I'm enjoying my crab roll,"
Yeah.
um, and also more generally and more deeply think about the environment and the way people treat each other and the way animals are treated and how land gets developed and all of those issues that are actually more important issues than a thriller. But I did want the thriller to be thrilling at the same time.
Yes. Which is a very important aspect of this genre, which does lead me to my next question, which is why write the dark and twisted? Why are you writing the dark, criminal, like mean stuff, I guess? Like, why aren't you writing the next great American novel like The Grapes of Wrath or something like that? Why mystery thriller?
Well, we're dark and twisted, Sabrina.
Yay!
I I think
You're in good company.
I think the other thing is, I mean, the Grapes of Wrath is sort of dark and twisted. There are mean characters and there's a mean world
Yeah, yeah,
involved, but
yeah.
right. Um, I also don't think either of us are. We're just not Steinbeck. I mean, who is, right? But also, we love Carl Hyacin and we love Raymond Chandler, and we love those books, and we love laughing. And we love. I think like when I see a review for the book and it's like I could not put it down. I'm like very. That's like, oh, we did our job. And when someone says this was hysterical, I'm like, yeah, that really got it.
Yeah,
So I think those for me those are the two feelings, and I think in a way that's why we wrote it the way we did. The other thing I'd like people to take away with it is the story behind the story, whether it's about Maine or another place. Like right now, I'm in New York City, which is not my favorite place, but a thing that makes it tolerable is like hanging out with someone who comes from a totally different world than I do and figuring out where they eat a food that I've never had before and going there and hanging out with folks who all come from that place and just kind of getting a sense of the story underneath the story is fascinating. Like I think that those things make a place more interesting, make life more interesting, and we gloss over them too much. And so I think having people just look at the world through that lens, which is a lens that I find myself enjoying life more when I look through it, I think is a sort of an underlying goal for me.
That
yeah.
makes a lot of sense. Go ahead, Jack.
No, I was just going to agree. I mean, I think that you're always looking to um, leave people with a sense of having more in their brain and in their kishkas than they had when they started. So it's not just a completely disposable experience. It's an
Yeah.
experience that leaves you changed in some way, preferably for the better. But yeah, dark and twisted. I don't think either of us think of ourselves as literary giants. I mean, we're not aspiring to be William Faulkner.
Hmm.
Um, and we love this genre, so this is a good genre to write. I mean, there are other genres we could have chosen, I suppose, but this happens to be something we both love. And in addition to to Chandler and Carl Hyacin, there are the television series and like the Wire and Breaking Bad, and there are movies, like
Hmm.
Casablanca, not Casablanca, Maltese Falcon and The Big Sleep, that all of which influenced us in one way or another.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I think what a lot of authors I have found who are in this genre write it because that's what they enjoyed reading. And I've even seen authors that are like, I tried to write in another genre, even though I don't even read in that genre, whatever. And then they come back here because this is where you get to play with all of the darkness of humanity in like a very safe way, I feel
Right.
like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, gonna go kind of switch gears into the craft itself a little bit more. If you could teach a new writer one thing, what would it be? And can you teach it to me right now?
Rewrite. Rewrite.
right? Just keep
Rewrite.
rewriting.
Yeah, rewriting is good. One thing that I learned from a very good writer, Michael Pollan, who's extraordinary, who doesn't write in this genre, but is just a fantastic writer, is to read what you wrote out loud. And if it doesn't sound right, fix it. And I think that's a really good thing. The other is to write down or find some way to capture notes of the interesting things you see, which you talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Observation. Yes. Don't forget that observation is ideas.
And the other one is to get into a flow state. Do whatever you have to do to get into a flow state and write. If you can position yourself so it feels like you have an internal narrator just telling your fingers what to do. That's what writing the first draft should feel like. The fact that it feels good when you write it doesn't mean it actually is good. You have to go back and reread it and make it.
Yeah.
But like that's how the first draft should come out. And if that means you do it in the middle of the night or the very early morning, or you on top of a mountain, you do it on paper, you do it on a laptop, like on your phone, whatever it is that puts you into that flow state, don't judge it, trust it.
Yeah.
Stravinsky said
eventually
he would start writing by after dinner, opening a bottle of brandy, and he would write music, and he would go to sleep when it was empty. And he said, sometimes I go to sleep early, sometimes I go to sleep late. I always go to sleep drunk. And like, it's not the best method for your health, but he wrote Petrushka, he's okay. Whatever process you have to be creative, like go for it. I don't know. That's what I think.
Yeah. August Wilson used to say he wrote a lot of his stuff in coffee shops. And he said, the clatter of everybody talking to each other would somehow would take up the part of his mind that would become distracted. And he would just have a notebook, and he said, and then the characters would just start talking to him. And he said, sometimes I didn't know what the hell they were saying or why they were saying it. But, I would write it down. They said something, and then another character entered. I didn't know who that was. Some other character entered, and he said something. And, little by little, you build it. But you do have to have a place, and you have to get yourself into a state of mind where it's not scary to write. It's fun to write.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be good.
And to be okay with all those voices in your head, that doesn't mean you're a crazy person.
Yeah, it doesn't mean crazy. and then really edit. Like the editing is serious, because editing doesn't, for some people, feel as good. But like August, Dad, after he wrote that stuff, it would be like a 3.5 hour, 4 hour play. You would have to work with him to make it shorter, right?
Yes, right.
It was a bad play. It was a bad play.
3 or 4 productions of it before. I mean, often he didn't even know what the story of the play was until second or third draft.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking about August Wilson at any length, but it was amazing that he trusted that it would work out. And I think that's what we did too, in a way.
Yeah.
We trusted it would work out.
Yeah.
We had faith in it somehow.
So I kind of have 2 follow-up questions based on that too. The first is, this was your first experience writing a novel, correct? Both of you?
No, it's my second.
It's your second. Okay.
Right.
So how is it writing a debut novel together though? And I also just wanted to call out that I love the dedication to Gabriel at the beginning. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is the cutest thing ever. So kind of talk about like when coming to that place and being like, I am going to write this thing with another person and I'm not going to do it on my own. Like, how did you be like, this is the way to do it?
I think it was automatic in some sense, in that Josh had all of the important information and attitude about the story, and I had the ability to tell a story. Not that he didn't, but and we never really said, do we dare or anything like that. We just started working because it was fun.
Just started happening, and we're like, what this? We're doing this.
Doing this. I mean, there was a minute, I think, when I thought, I'm going to write this book, and I'm going to consult with Josh. And that minute lasted about a minute. I mean, I understood right away that was never going to work. And we just started doing it. I mean, is that your recollection too?
Yeah. And I think it was also a point in my life where I was really enjoying time with you. I mean, I've always enjoyed time with you, but like, when you're growing up and you're in your 20s and early 30s and you've got work stuff and family stuff and social stuff, we were emotionally close, but we just didn't spend as much time together. And as boys, I think we need a project to spend time together, because we're, generally speaking, boys aren't as good at hanging out together if they're not like tinkering. And so we would go to these lunches once a week. And then the idea that we would have a project together, for me, felt, I mean, I'm not into cars, but if we've been restoring an old car, I'd been like, it's something fun to do with my dad. That's great. But this actually tickled me. It was interesting. And I liked doing it in a different way. And so it felt like a container for our relationship, which was also really special, that felt like very easy to say yes to without quite knowing what we were getting into. And then it demanded something of us that just kind of forced us to keep on doing it in a way that was really good. I didn't want it to end.
Yeah, that's amazing. How long
Yeah.
did it take you guys to write this?
It happened over a very long period of time, partly because of COVID and everything else. But gosh, I don't know
Our
when.
jobs, we both
Yeah.
We both had jobs, yes.
yeah.
So when did we start?
I think we
2000.
first brought you the idea around 2014, 2015.
Oh, wow. Okay. So this is a long time in the
We
Yeah.
started
making.
working in earnest. It probably took us 2-3 years and we kind of noodled on it after that for a while. And then once we started writing in earnest, I want to say it was 2 years before we really were like, this is a book. And then this is a bad book. Let's change it. And then it became, and then it was many drafts actually.
Yeah.
And then a long time selling it, finding, then there's the
Yeah,
work
that
of
takes a long
finding
time.
an agent and having the agent pitch it and looking at what, where it can be sold and stuff like that. And then after selling it, the editing process again, which was pretty modest in terms of the actual book itself, but a lot of, comma moving and hyphens and how many spaces are after
Yeah.
a sentence stuff. Yeah. It took a long time.
It does. I mean, once you even get into the process, like that's just not even writing the book. Once you get into, you've got a contract, it's still at least 18 months typically
Yeah.
before a book comes
Yeah.
out. So it's a whole long process that I think a lot of readers don't fully realize just how long it takes, not just the idea of like writing a book, especially a debut where luckily, Josh, you had your dad who has storytelling experience. We have a lot of writers that listen to this podcast that have no other experience, no
Yeah.
other like guidance on, and so trying to learn how to do that while you write is quite a bit.
Yeah.
So Jack, how does this experience writing a novel differ from writing, producing, and promoting for Broadway?
Well, the first novel I wrote was called Broadway Melody, and it's a romance set in and around Broadway over a very long period of time, about 40 years. And that was relatively simple compared to this book because it's not a thriller, so the plotting was not nearly as important. But it happened quite naturally. This book was very different and very different from any experience I'd ever had, which was exciting at my age to have a completely new experience. Because I've never really been an author on Broadway. I've been a dramaturg. I've been a creative consultant, and so and a producer, and which is a lot of business stuff. And so this was like, can we have this wholly new experience for me, which is also a collaboration of a different kind than I'd ever had, even though I've had lots of collaborations, and then make it work over a long period of time. Theater shows take a long period of time to develop too, so that part didn't intimidate me.
Yeah.
The other thing, though,
go ahead.
well, I was going to say, he wrote a book that it was quite amazing, which diagrammed the shape of an American musical. Sort of said, and the first song has to achieve this. When the curtain goes down in the first act, these things need to have happened, and that's like really an extraordinary skill to be able to like diagram how this works. And one thing that it was really cool to see unfold was we did the same thing with Raymond Chandler, with some movies, with Carl Heiss. Like, all right, what happened? How many paragraphs can happen without the protagonist? How many characters are they?
So you did like an analysis, like a study.
How does this thing work? Yeah, and it was kind of a fun little thing to do to figure out. All right, we're going to game this out. Kind of like the anatomy of one of these books. That's a good version of one of these books.
Yeah, I think that's so fantastic and really is a great way to learn about how books are structured and how plot moves forward and things like that. So back in the day when people were learning how to write books before we had the printing press and we had all the things, they would just copy like other books. They would handwrite, copy the books, copyright it, and then that would be how they learned to be able to write their own. So it's just so fascinating how like taking that time to do an analysis of books that are successful or stories that are successful that like do what you are wanting to do. It's such a valuable effort. It is time, but it is a valuable effort.
There was somebody, I remember reading this, I forget who it was, a screenwriter who was someone who wanted to be a screenwriter, who started by typing out Psycho. He got the script,
Oh,
Psycho,
That's great.
and then just typed it as if
yeah.
he were writing it. And he said, I typed it, one or two times, and then, somehow because it's such a well-structured movie,
Hmm.
an unusually structured movie. And he said that's kind of how I learned where things have to go and how you have to do them, and how long an act is and all of those
Yeah.
things.
That's amazing. That is
Yeah.
amazing. Okay, we're going to move to the section that I like to call rapid fire, which has never once been rapid fire. So feel free to
Won't be
take
with
your
us, I
time.
guarantee it.
All right. So I have a couple of questions for you all, for both of you. First is, what is on your desk?
Neither of us have desks.
We don't have desks.
Okay, where do you write? Like, what do you do? Where do you write?
That's a really good question. We don't have desks.
Yes,
I
you
write.
write
I
at the
write on.
restaurant. That's
I write at a kitchen table or on a couch generally. And in the winter, I did a lot of writing on a rocking chair on a laptop in front of my wood stove,
nice.
with a cat
Okay.
purring next
I
to me.
write in bed.
Yeah.
I'm prone most of the day. My father didn't have a desk in his office, and this was a very influential thing to me.
Yeah.
He was in the real estate business. He wasn't in some unusual, eccentric business, but he refused to have a desk. He had a coffee table, and he put stuff on the coffee table. He sat on the sofa, and all through my career in theater, I've never had a desk. I never wanted to be in a power position. I wanted to be in a collaborative position. And so then I decided, where I'm really comfortable is, prop up a couple of pillows and put the laptop on my lap, and here we go. No desk.
Wow. This is amazing. And I love that that's like now generationally, 3 generations
Yeah.
of you guys, no desk. What ritual, if any, do you have before or after you write?
After we have a bourbon, often,
Right.
unless we were
Okay.
writing early in the morning. Most of the time, we would write in the afternoon, and we would have a drink when we're having meetings together about writing.
Right.
Before, what do we do before?
When I'm writing by myself the first thing I do is play a couple of games of solitaire on the
Oh,
computer.
okay.
That's interesting.
Does it just kind of like bring your brain down
Yeah,
to
it's,
base level?
what I call pencil sharpening.
Okay, okay.
You use the pencil, you just keep sharpening it.
All right. Okay. Excuse me. The next question is, what is the most bullshit piece of advice you've heard?
Write what you know.
Huh.
Yeah.
Good.
There's an amazing author named JT Ellison who, when I asked the question, that was her exact same answer too. She was like, don't write what you know.
Find out things.
Find out things.
Find out things.
When I was in college, this isn't advice about writing, but I think it relates to writing. I was studying philosophy and literature, and I decided to take a year off. I was writing about how physical work relates to philosophical questions, and I decided to take a year off and go work as a shepherd in southern Italy and Sicily. And I told my college advisor that this was my plan, and he said, "I strongly advise you not to do that." That was the most bullshit piece of advice I've ever gotten. I was like, done. I'm so doing it.
You were like, absolutely, I will now.
Yeah,
Because
I'm
you
doing
said that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm sure was that an incredible
It
experience?
was an
It sounds
incredible
like it was
experience. I
just
learned more herding sheep with, refugees in Sicily on Mount Etna than I did in 4 years of college. Absolutely.
Unreal.
My
I feel
Italian's
like you
really
guys have like a million
my Italian's
lifetimes
very,
between the two of you.
my Italian is so fucked up though. Learning Sicilian Albanian refugees is not the way to learn Italian.
So, what is the best piece of advice you've heard?
The best piece of advice I heard was not about writing specifically, but it was about getting where you want to get, which was take any job in the area you're interested in. Take any job, even if you're not interested in that particular aspect of the job. This is when I was young, of course, and trying to
Yeah.
break in. And it's the piece of advice I give to young people who are, who are asking for advice about this, mostly about the theater. But I don't know that I heard the best advice about writing that I've ever had, and I still refer to it once a year, is the introduction and the final chapter of The Elements of Style by E.B. White and Strunk, whatever his first name was. The first one, the introduction, is an introduction to the new edition, and the last chapter is called An Approach to Style. The middle part of it is like, where do you put a comma and how do you,
Yeah.
what's a gerund and that kind of thing, which is less useful after a certain point in life. But those two chapters are, I read them religiously once a year.
Yeah,
That's
that's
amazing.
really good advice. That book is like a Bible. It's so good. And the one that I heard was from I can't remember this guy's name. He was really smart, and he was talking to authors, and he said you have to actually write. Like when you have an impulse to not write, write. When you have a reason to not write, write. Just actually do it. Um, Otherwise, nothing else matters. And I really like that, and I think about that when I have an impulse not to. Um,
Yeah.
just do it anyways. It's
Yeah.
uncomfortable. You don't want to stare at an empty screen for a while, but don't give yourself an out.
I love that. I love that. And I think it's very true, especially, I mean, I think people can figure out what works for them in their process, but it's the idea of like if your body is calling you or if like you're being called to it to do it. And then even on the times where you feel like, ugh, gross, like I just don't, doing it still tells your body and your mind that this is a priority. Like this is something that
Yeah.
we are focusing on and it's a habit. It becomes something that's like secondary nature.
Chandler had a great thing. He said, I have one simple rule. I go in my office and I don't have to write, but I'm not allowed to do anything else.
But you don't have to write.
You don't have to write, but you can't do anything else. He said, you
Yeah.
sit there for long enough, you start to write.
I love that idea,
It's
actually.
good. I should do that
um,
at the gym.
yeah, that should do that with the gym. That's a great
Yeah, I wish I could
idea.
apply that to physical fitness, but I've never been able to.
What is the darkest idea that you've ever had that scared you about yourself?
I don't know. It's not that there are so many that I can't choose one. I'm trying to find one.
Oh, really? I'm like trying to sort them out. Well,
So
I'll go
I'll
because
just
he's thinking. So
okay.
I love to grow my own food and I fish obsessively. And I love to eat what I catch when it's sort of ecologically the right thing to do. And there was a point in my life where I realized that deer were eating a lot of the vegetables that I grew, and then I was buying beautiful grass-fed beef, and I thought I should eat the deer. So I eat the broccoli one way or the other, and but I'm not a gun person, so I got deeply into bow hunting, and I taught myself to bow hunt, and it changed my relationship to a lot of things, to meat, to death, to my body, breaking down an animal yourself, and it was really spiritually and physically profound thing for me. But one thing with bow hunting is you need to be really good at estimating yardage. If you think a deer is at 20 yards and it's at 30 yards, you'll miss or injure the deer. So you have to be really good at that. So I was trying to train myself to be excellent at it. And I would come down to the city for meetings, and I found myself walking down the street or the subway, and I'd see a person and I'm like, all right, they're walking by that garbage can. They're at 25 yards. And and then I'd
I
be
could get
walking
them.
towards them and I'd pace and I'd go, ooh, shoot, they were at 18 yards. Sorry, I hit you in the neck instead of the chest. And I would do that all through the city walking around. And there was a moment where I thought, well, this is really dark. And then
Just
sometimes I'd get
thinking
it right and
about
I'd be like, lights out. Like,
flying
oh,
off
it's too hard, you
arrows.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Random attacks on
Yeah.
strangers.
I've never shot a person with a bow, but I definitely went through a period of time of being like, where would I have hit you if I was right about the yardage?
I
That's
feel
pretty
like of
tough.
all the places in the world for that to maybe happen, New York seems like the most likely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It won't be me, I promise.
it won't be.
Yeah. You think of anything, Dad?
No, I'm passing.
Yeah. That's okay. So you talked about how this took a lot of drafts. So I'm wondering how many drafts do you do before you share with anybody else? So obviously you two shared with each other, but how many drafts before you were like, Mom, read it, or wife, read it, or friend?
We shared a very early draft with Josh's sister, my daughter Anna,
Mhm.
who was very critical of it. Enjoyed being,
I'm sure she loved that. Oh my God. That's
and
just
she
like,
wasn't
let
shy
me
about
at
it.
it.
But after that, I think we probably wrote 3 or 4 drafts before we showed it to anyone, and then we showed it to a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Some of them, literary types, and some of them just friends. And
Yeah.
obviously, I showed it to my wife Linda, it's Josh's mother, and quite a few people. And we got a lot of feedback, and we rewrote based on some of the feedback, and some of the feedback is just not right, and you just have to dismiss
Yeah.
it.
which is
Yeah.
so important, that discerning.
Yeah.
We talk about that a lot on this podcast, is like discerning when you get feedback of what is applicable to the story that you are telling and what is just somebody putting on like, man, like you could do this, or just trying
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
like what's a constructive and purposeful critique versus just like
Yeah.
somebody critiquing because they want to critique.
To
Yeah.
some it's important. And I think listening to the part of you that goes, oh, but I really like that. I don't want to cut it. I wrote that. I'm attached to it. But some part of me knows it's not forwarding the
Murder your
plot. Or
darlings. You gotta
yeah,
kill
Murder.
them.
like
Yes.
learning that feeling versus like, no, that's actually really good. That's not going anywhere. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to stand by my, stuff is and understanding that difference is important. And
You get attached to fancy little ideas because they're so clever, and they're
yeah,
actually not useful.
That's
that's
the
what
worst,
the
when you're
is
like,
right.
oh, I have to
I do
erase
remember. I
that.
do remember two. Hold on for one second. What? Okay, so I'm gonna move, but I'll talk as I move.
Okay.
That's fine. Um, two notes that we got in, or one a note and one a short story. We were doing a musical about Jelly Roll Morton, and there was a woman who was invested a lot of money in it, but she was not a theater person. She was a lawyer, and she called and left a voicemail the next day after the first preview that said, it's a very simple message: more tap, less crap. And I thought, that's a good note.
A
That's a
good
really
That's a
note.
good note for any musical. And the other thing is,
But then
set
you,
of similarly semi-coherent notes came in to a woman who was directing her first Broadway show, and she turned to one of the authors and she said, "What do I do with these notes?" And he said, "That's what the delete key is for."
Also true. This is important. That's what you
Yes.
have to know to discern.
Yeah.
I'm just going
Right.
to delete that, ignore that
Get rid
comment.
of them. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What is, this is the last question. What is your old school favorite mystery or thriller?
The Big Sleep.
Big Sleep. Okay.
I was going to say The Big Sleep as well. A little less old school is Double Whammy by Carl Hyacin.
Okay. Okay.
I love that story in part because there's fishing in it, but it is one of my favorite characters. His character Skink is, I think, one of the great characters written in slightly more contemporary
Yeah. That's
crime.
fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. I love to talk about old school favorites because we do a lot of talking about new releases and just recent books, but books are so evergreen, right? Like, and they're a legacy, their stories can stick around forever. So it's always fun to like think back at like some of the good ones that we've read in the past. Well, I appreciate both of you joining me today. This was such a lovely conversation. Where can people find you?
Great. We have a website, jjviertel.com. And I am on X. Dad's on Blue Sky, just our names, Josh Viertel and Jack Viertel.
Yeah.
I'm on Instagram too. And then you can write us at jjviertels, plural, at gmail.com as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And make sure that you go out and you pick up the Glass Eel, which is available wherever you buy books. Also, if you want to reach out to me, you can find me at Sabrina Thatcher Author on Instagram. And if you want more information about my book coaching services, you can visit crimeandquill.com. Until next time, friends, stay sharp and write twisted.